I'm Penny Pillsbury. I'm the director here at Brownell Library, and I'm certainly excited to have a chance to, we don't clear this room for just any old reason. So, I think we've done it for an author and for a play, and that was that in the last 20 years. So think how special this is. What a great occasion. If you haven't been here since we renovated, we added 50% more space in 2001 after a lot of work by a lot of people. Some of you are some of those people. And we would love to have you look around after the program. There will be some refreshments, and you can stay and chat. The library closes at 5, but hey, you can stay till then anyway. And so I guess without further ado, I'll welcome all of you to our IBM 50 years memories, and I expect that I've got a couple speakers who you'll hear from, but I expect some of you to be speakers too, because I bet you have memories that you can share, or funny stories that now you can repeat, or that kind of thing. So first, I'm going to introduce Corwin. I guess everybody knows him as Corky, Elwell. He graduated from Bennington, Vermont High School back in '45, and has a BA from Middlebury College and an MGA from Wharton School, University of Penn. And then he spent 2 years at the U.S. Army between '46 and '48. In '52 to '53, he was the assistant to the city manager in Concord, New Hampshire. And then 53 to 55, he was the town manager in Bethel, Vermont. And 55 to 60, he was the village manager in Essex, Junction. And he was definitely the town manager during 1957 when IBM moved to the Junction. And he was and he spent his last couple decades working as town manager in Brattleboro, Vermont. So I want Corky to step up here and tell us about what Essex was like in 1957. Thank you, Corky.
I probably will ramble on some, but stay with me. I started on May 10th, 1955, and I was the first village manager in Essex Junction. Our office was located on School Street, and Betty and I just went up and drove around, and it looks like it's a residence at this point. But at that time, the town and village clerk was located on the first floor. Phil McCausland, who was the village attorney, had his offices on the second floor, and I had a room probably about 8 by 8 in the back of the office, in which I was ensconced with a secretary for about a year. And at the end of that time, we renovated some space in Lincoln Hall, and I was there for the balance of the tour. Mildred Barnes was the town clerk. Some of you may remember Mildred, great lady, and she was really fun to work with and very supportive of me. Some of you may know that when a manager comes into a community, sometimes he's not received or she's not received with great approbation. Folks have been doing things like they've been doing them, and they don't want anybody to disturb their turf. But Mildred didn't take that attitude, and she was very, very wonderful. Essex Junction in those days was a pretty sleepy community, but was beginning to get busier. Building was starting down at Indian Acres, had started and proceeded quite along. Marvin Heights was just beginning, and then Pinewood Manor began a little bit later. I was hired by the village trustees and the water commissioners, acting jointly. And they were really people of great vision, as you'll hear a little bit later. The village trustees were Giles Willey, Barney Coffey, and Henry Baldwin. The water commissioners were Bill Wright, Paul Raines, and one of the Drurys, and I cannot remember his first name, but his brother was Had, and I think his name was Robert. Being the first village manager gave me a lot of latitude. I could do nothing but improve what had been in place. And so I made the changes that I thought needed to be made, and boards began to get meeting agendas. That was something new. monthly financial statements, which they'd never had, and complete minutes of each meeting as we went along. But still some old habits prevailed. There are press here, and they'll appreciate this vignette. There was a fella, he's still around, Joe Gemelli, was a reporter for the Burlington Free Press. We were having a meeting up in the School Street premises. I think it was the first year I was here, with the trustees. And Joe was there to cover the trustees' meeting, and I forgot what the subject was, but it was a very sensitive subject. And one of the trustees, Henry Baldwin, indicated to Joe Gemelli that he wanted to read the material that Joe prepared before it was printed in the Free Press. And Joe indicated to him, that's not the way we do business. And Henry said, well, if that's the case, we're going to take this meeting up to my house and you're not invited. And Joe told them what the rules of the road were in terms of the media and public meetings. And they finally agreed we'd go on with the meeting, and we got the business done. One of the recognized needs at the time, early on when I was here, was the water system. And the board had already engaged an engineering firm to do a study, and which finally resulted in the construction of the reservoir at Indian River. The Saxon's Hill Reservation, and I'm not even sure that may exist today, but that water system, it was perceived, was not going to be adequate to cover the future, even without the advent of IBM. And some of you who were here may remember the green and brown water that came out of the Indian River system. It was just terrible. People would come into meetings with a milk bottle full of green water and really lay out myself, the water commissioners, and want to know what the hell are you going to do about it. A couple of years passed, and Charlie Petrie, who was then chair of the Board of Selectmen, came to the trustees and water commissioners and to inquire whether and explore with them whether the town could have a portion of my time. And they finally agreed, and there was a suitable arrangements made financially and time sharing that I would be working for the Board of Selectmen as well as the trustees and water commissioners. Working for 3 boards is not easy, believe me. Meanwhile, the Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation was busy in the village and purchased the Teach-Out Farm on which to construct a 21,000 square foot building, a spec building. They didn't have anybody in line to buy it. And this is where the vision of the trustees and the water commissioners came in. They agreed to build the original highway and put the water line out to that building without anybody understanding that the building might ever be occupied. And lo and behold, IBM came along and bought the whole farm, as you may know and remember. Obviously, there was great celebration by everybody who'd been responsible and involved in the process. And the story that went the rounds at that time was that Tom Watson, who was then president of IBM, liked to ski at Stowe, and he thought it would be a great idea to have an IBM facility located in Vermont ski country. Folks in Essex Junction and the Burlington area generally didn't care whether that was the reason or not, but they were delighted to have the facility here. As you know, the plant opened on February 25th, 1957, and then my troubles began. Some of you may remember Harry Williams, who was I'm not sure what his title was. He was a civil engineer, and he was facilities engineer, okay. He was responsible for all of the water, electricity, and other kinds of things that a plant would need to operate. And he and I had many, many conversations over the green and brown water that we were providing to the facility, which really was screwing up their processing of product. We finally got it resolved, and I think Harry did most of it, did all of it, in fact, because what they did, I think, was to install a good filtering system that took out all of that junk that we were passing along to them, as well as the water. Meanwhile, the economic shot in the arm for the whole Burlington area was coming to Essex Junction as well, most predominantly, with more and more housing being built. Almost every available building lot in town became a site for a new home. And Betty and I drove around. We got up here about a half hour earlier, and we only saw a very small part of the community, but some of the areas that have been built. We drove down Susie Wilson Road. Susie Wilson Road was a gravel road when I was here, and now it's a 4-lane highway, which with a lot of wonderful taxable property down there for you. My job at that time became more and more of a crunch for me as a manager and for my family. By that time we had, by 1960, we had 3 children. And there was a planning commission for the town, one for the village, a board of zoning adjustment for the town, and one for the village. And we had minimal staff in both town and village, expected to cover all of these meetings. And I was out about four nights a week. And finally, my then wife said, "You need to get a new job or we get a divorce." Well, fortunately, in September 1960, the Brattleboro manager retired, and I applied for the job and was hired and began work in Brattleboro on November 1st, 1960. But I have great memories of my time, 5.5 years in Essex Junction. We lived, when we first arrived in town, we lived on Church Street, right almost behind the church. And then we moved later that fall over on Pleasant Street, opposite where Dr. Evans' house was, and really enjoyed our time here, and it's very, very enjoyable for me to be back and see some old friends and tell you what the fun I had when I was here with some of your neighbors, and it's been great. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll have some questions for him in a minute. Now I'd like to introduce George Dunbar, who grew up in Windsor, Vermont, went to high school at Windsor, Vermont, and went to World War II in the Pacific arena. He attended Drake University for a while, but he told me he was in a ghastly streetcar accident that, left him sort of, injured enough, so he decided maybe give Drake time to miss him. And then he became a worker at Cone Automatic in Windsor. And then he wants to make it very clear to all of you that he worked at the prison in Windsor, Vermont. And he arrived in '57 in Essex Junction and lived here, lived in Burlington at first, and then moved to Colchester, and then found a place to live here in the Junction. When he first came, he was a machine repairman, rose in the ranks. They saw a good guy and they knew a good guy when they saw one, and he left as a manufacturing superintendent. He was on the village trustee board for 4 years, and then was elected president of the trustees, and he served in that position for 12 years. And George, tell us what happened and how it was. Okay.
I think the first comment I'd like to make is that I think Corky's guaranteed a place in heaven if he worked with 3 boards at the same time. I never had a feel for that. I'm not sure I would have wanted to either. Well, let me pick up if I can. I don't have anything prepared, nor did I plan to, but I wasn't one of the first group that came to the village. My first interview was in April. My third one was in May, and I still don't know to this day whether they hired me to stop seeing me come up here or whether they really wanted me, but it turned out all right. And of course, at that time, I remember the plant. I think it was 964. Help me out, somebody. You're right. Oh, I'm only off by 2. That's not bad after all these years. And it was a different experience for me because I joined a company that I soon found out was the kind of company that I'd searched for. And I did well with that company, and I'm very grateful. My first job was as a machine repairman was to go to Poughkeepsie, like most of us did, and to learn. And they go to Poughkeepsie, and they in turn turned right around and sent me out to Erie, Pennsylvania for 8 weeks to learn about the Swansons. That was an automatic assembly machine that did some work on the wire contact relay. That was the beginning of our technology in the plant. I'm sure there's some people like Paul that can add to that later on. And so at that time, it was a wire contact relay, a switching device. It was a permissive make relay, and we went from there to core planes, and you probably can add a few other things. But in 1962 was the beginning of the SLT, and that really changed this place dramatically. And I can't go too far beyond there because I've been out of there 23 years. But SLT really changed Burlington, I think, and from there we went to a lot of things that people here can tell you about later. But combined with that was also a great experience being on the Board of Trustees here. And it was different than what Corky said, quite a bit different. There were some battles, and they were fun battles, and I survived them all, I guess. Charles mentioned when he came in today that I don't have anywhere near as much hair as I did when I came on the board, and I think that's probably true. My wife tells me that occasionally. But the plant, the plant at that time, we were busy getting the thing going, a lot of overtime. I don't think we ever exceeded 300 people for the first 4 or 5 years. Somebody can, correct me on that, but I think that was close. But in the midst of all that, the IBM image that I found there, we had the IBM club immediately. We had Christmas parties for the children. We had all those kinds of things, which, in my opinion, helped make the job even more. Not just the job itself, but all those extras. And there were a lot of other good things. I brought some pictures, but I'm not going to, if somebody wants to see them after, but the problem with me, I didn't take pictures of the buildings. I wasn't interested in much in the buildings. I was interested in being in them at the time. And in most cases, I'm in the pictures, and that's not what I'm here for. So if somebody wants to see them after, we'll do that. There's a few pictures of the IBM club with all the children, Bud Thuy, and some of those people coming here to give them presents. And to me, that was the IBM that I enjoyed. And when I came back from Erie, I did work as a machine repairman, and a lot of good things happened to me after that, from salary administration to personnel, which was in salary administration, was in personnel, to first line manager, back up to personnel, and around, and a lot of people can make comments about that too, but it all worked out well in the end. And a lot of good people, I met a lot of good people, worked with a lot of good people, and now miss a lot of those good people, as you all know. But I'm 81 years old, and I'm glad to be here at 81 years old. And I'm not quite as perfect as I was a few years ago, but I'm here. So to me, the IBM then was the relays, that type of technology. I think we handled it well. I think the management here at the time, Bob Morris, Jim Ritchie, and what was the first one, Henry? Dana Philby, thank you, yeah. And they got us off and running, and hopefully we contributed enough to make it go, and you know what IBM is today. And I can't talk to that too intelligently because, like I say, I've been out of there 23 years, and I want to tell you a little cute story about that, and then I think I'd like to turn it over because you people have got some questions, and there's some people in this audience who can add a lot. I met I can't remember his name, and I'm not trying to hide, but I met somebody early last fall on the street, and we got talking about a million things in IBM, and they said, "How long have you been out, George?" And I said, 23 years. And they said, "Boy, I'll give you a little advice." And I said, "What do you mean, a little advice?" And I said, "You better turn around once in a while when you're walking, because after 20 years, IBM's not interested in paying any more pension, and they might have a hitman on you." But that hasn't happened. So My experience with IBM was entirely different than Corky's, and again, I give him a lot of credit because working with, I made a joke out of it, but working with 3 boards is a very difficult thing to do. Working with one is, and I think Joyce can attest to that, working with one can be a challenge in itself. And it got the village and the plant off running right, and it's been here ever since, and hopefully it'll be here for a long time to come. So I'll get off, and hopefully we'll have some questions. Thank you.
Before I open up for audience participation, are there questions for Corky and George? And then you're going to have to do some, yes?
Why specifically did IBM pick Essex? And why specifically did they pick that site to build when, I would assume in 1957 there was a lot of space in Essex to build?
There was a building there, and there was a road there, and there was water there.
And an airport.
And an airport, you could almost walk to the airport from there. It was almost ready-made, and I give the credit to the men who worked on this. Governor Snelling was on the GBIC board at that time. Might have been the president, I'm not sure. But the board of trustees and the water commissioners in Essex Junction that had the foresight to see what that development, it was going to be an industrial park. That's why GBIC bought it. And they had the concept that it would be chopped up into, you know, what you normally see in an industrial park. And we're fortunate enough to have IBM come in and buy the whole farm. It was great.
Plus, it had a lot of the things that the company would look for. For example, the university, so the employees could further their education.
You want to stand
Had a lot of recreational activities, and it was recognized as a good place to live. Those are all some of the criteria.
I think part too, why the plant grew, is they had a real good workforce here. And I can give you one very simple example, is when we started with a wire contact relay, we were working on a line, and Ray and Bob and these guys can all attest to this. We had some of the old timers come up to us and say, you know, we do 250 a day, and that's a good day's work. Well, we were only training in Poughkeepsie for probably 2 or 3 weeks, and we were doing 450. And then we got up to 600. And then we had a guy, I think his name was Walt Bacon, that came around, and he was a methods engineer, and he built some racks for us to put our boxes on. And he said, you know, we've got, what you want to do is you want to reduce your reach. And I believe that by the time we got done, those people on a wire contact relay were doing somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 a day, which is a far greater number than the 250 that were done before. And I think that the people at IBM in a place where they could expand this place realized they had some very good workers up here. You know, we were referred to as the 500 farmers from Vermont.
I have a question. What is a wire contact relay and what does it do?
It does what a semiconductor does at that time. It
Right.
switches on and off.
Okay. And the first one you ever made is in the glass case right over there at Brownell Library.
You got one up there?
Yeah, the first one off the line is in the case, according to Bonnie who brought it over. So, yeah, well, it's a locked case, so don't forget that. Other questions for Corky and George?
You said that it was the airport, the road, the water. Did the railroad have anything to do
Yeah.
with it?
I was, when I came up here, I was supervising shipping and traffic. And you had the railroad behind the plant. You had the Railway Express office right here in town at the train station. Many times I'd come out looking for supplies from vendors. So you had the infrastructure really in place to facilitate growth.
But the interstate wasn't done.
No,
Can I
it
add to
wasn't
the railroad?
needed. It wasn't needed.
I like that railroad.
people don't know this, but IBM doesn't locate any place in the United States unless there's a railroad going through its property because of a strike thing. If you got the railroad, they can't strike you. So it was nice to have the railroad here. It made things easy.
Thank you.
So other questions for George or Corky? Ah,
I
yes.
had one. George had mentioned about the Christmas parties they used to have for children, and I recall back then that if a person that when you worked at IBM, if you had a child, they used to give a Christmas gift out, one for each child, and that was really nice. I thought that was really great, and kind of brings back a lot of memories like that.
Those are nice affairs.
Yeah.
Another thing I want to open up,
Yeah.
if you had say you were a father and son, worked at IBM, that was a special deal. And, they got luggage. They kind of encouraged that type of thing.
A heritage.
It's a very paternalistic company.
My father-in-law sold the cows and got a job at IBM, and it was the first. Ralph Pillsbury had never had a vacation in his entire life. I don't think he even got Saturdays off on the farm, and he felt like he died and gone to heaven. You know, he just loved the fact that he could go to visit his in-laws in England without find somebody to milk the cows. So it was a good thing.
I'd like to bring up a memory, my name. When the plant first opened up, a lot of you will remember this. There was no.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I remember your face. I worked with you.
Who are you?
Al Brunini.
Now, thank you. I'm Bob Skinner.
It's been a long time. I'm still working through remembrances, but at any rate, when we came up here, Larry Gerlach, of course, was the. I don't want to use the word chef. He had charge of the cafeteria. We didn't have a cafeteria. As you come in the plant, you walk in this room on the right, you get sandwiches, different types of sandwiches. So that's what we had. Then that summer, I remember George Sporer. Anyone remember George Sporer?
Yeah. Sold eggs.
He had a farm out in Milton, chicken farm. So George would come in and sell fresh eggs on Monday. Remember that? So if somebody wrote to speak up or something, I'll get to that one. That's another incident. At any rate, George would sell eggs, and Larry Gerlach had a baker from Winooski, Mike something.
Mike Trono.
Mike Trono? Yeah. And Mike would bake bread, and we'd go and buy the bread at the end of the day. So somebody complained, are we in the relay business or the bread business? That was the end of that.
Other memories to share? Come on, this group has billions of them.
I got two or three I'd like to share with the group.
Why don't you just come to the front so the
Okay,
camera
okay.
gets your smiling face?
Maybe get us beyond that.
Yeah, right. To the ICs. I spent 36 years of my career with IBM, and Paul Castrucci. And the first time I came here was in the early 70s. And my family moved up here with me 78. And we've loved every minute of it. I'll give you a couple of snapshots through time, because I was privileged to sort of work on many of these things right in the very beginning. I'll give you an example of the kind of people we have here. It's amazing. At one time I was in headquarters, and as such I had the director of manufacturing support, which meant I approved capital and manpower for several sites, like Endicott and Poughkeepsie and Fishkill and Burlington. And what I would do with my staff is once a month we would go to a different location. And we would meet the people and see what they were doing there and get a feeling for what was going on. And after a while, going back to the same place 2 or 3 times, you started to realize that there was a pattern there. Every site took on the personality of the site where it was located. For example, Endicott was like the Midwest in their approach. Fishkill was like New York City. And Burlington was like Vermont. And what does that mean? What that means is, when I first came up here full time, I went to this friend who was an executive there in headquarters. I said, look, I'm going to Burlington. You got any advice for me? He says, oh, yeah. I said, what's the advice? He says, well, you go there and you're in your office first day, and 2 or 3 of the guys are in the office with you, and you're sitting there talking, and you look out the window and you say, geez, that's a beautiful mountain, Mount Mansfield. Somebody ought to put a road up that mountain. The next day you come to work and you'll see a bulldozer going up that mountain. Be careful what you tell them, because you'll get what you ask for in Burlington. Very industrious, very hardworking, honest people, just a pleasure to work with. And at one point in my career, I worked very closely with Henry Raymond and George here, and there might be a few people here, but just great people. Just as an example of the type of people we had, we were running one of the lines, and on Thursday we would have a review in terms of progress for that week. What kind of yields we got was one of the things. And the first thing that we reviewed was the yields, because how many good chips did you make? That was very, very important. So the fellow who did that for us was a guy by the name of Ed Chase. And his family goes back about 5 generations, I think, here. So he always was there at 8:30, because that was the first thing we reviewed. Well, this one day, it was 8:30 and Ed wasn't there. It was 9 o'clock and he still wasn't there. And I said, my God, what happened? So he comes waltzing in through the door, and I says, Ed, where you been? We've been waiting for you. He says, well, the weather forecaster says there's going to be a big rainstorm this next week, and I had to get out there and cut the hay before I came to work. Just as you couldn't say that in no other location in IBM could you have a story like that. Just when the people here are just wonderful people. We take it for granted in terms of what we got here, but it's just amazing. IBM computers in the very early stages, when they first were making computers, there was a logic portion and there was a memory portion. And the memory portion was made out of these little ferromagnetic material cores. They would look like Cheerios. And they had wires through these Cheerios. And by putting voltage through these wires, you could switch the core from either up or down, ones or zeros. And that's what the memory was all about. So that's how they made it before we made integrated circuits. And the first time IBM did that was it shipped a machine to the Rand Corporation in April of 1957. It had over 1 million ferrite cores in it. And if the volume was like a garage, one-car garage, and it was over $1 million for it, and it just, big, cumbersome kind of thing. Well, several years later, right here in Burlington, in 1988, we were building 1 million bit chips, small chips that could fit on your thumbnail. So we went from a machine that took a whole one-car garage and cost an arm and a leg to something that went onto a chip. And it was that reason that the computer industry has done what it has done is because of the integrated circuit memories. And they came out of Essex Junction. Nowhere else in the world. They came out of here. Okay, the very first ones that were ever produced were right here. Just a quickie background so you understand how this thing develops. I was in East Fishkill, and I was building transistors for the core memories, to switch to core memories. And Eric Block, who was vice president of engineering at that time, called myself and Ben Augusta, who came up here later, but you probably know Ben, and he had just gotten his PhD from Syracuse, and 2 people from the systems area, hardware and software. And he says, gentlemen, he says, Bob Henley, which was the first fellow we had in the components division, has just written a white paper. And this white paper says that if you think integrated circuits are good for the logic portion of the computer, you ain't seen nothing till you try it for memory. I paraphrase it. I want you guys to go out there and build an IC memory for computers. Now, none of us had ever worked on ICs. None of us. And he said there was a machine going to the system 360 Mod 95 high-end scientific to the National Security Agency in Washington the following year. And it required a very special computer storage memory on it for security. I want you to go out there and build that thing out of integrated circuits. And as we're walking out the door shaking, he says, don't worry. If you can't build it, I can build that out of tubes and other things. Don't worry about it. Just go do it. So, Ben and I rolled up our sleeves and went to work. And this was in the spring when he told us to do it. By 2 weeks before Christmas, we had the wafers to test. And we tested them, and we couldn't believe our eyes. Those things were flipping and flopping at speeds like we had never anticipated. So we got the good chips, put them in a system memory, put them on a computer, And within 18 months, that whole thing went from test tube to marketplace, which was just absolutely amazing. Because usually when you impact a dramatic technology, like you go from one cores to integrated circuits, so brand new, that takes 5 to 10 years. But this was done in 2 years because it was IBM. Based on that, Eric Block said, look, we've got to go after the commercial market now. I want you guys to design a memory to do the buffer memory on the System 360 and follow it up with a Phase 2i main memory on the System 360. And we did that, and we shipped it to Burlington. And you people, here the people in Burlington, just went to work with the old can-do attitude, and they made a zillion of these memories, and we went from 128 bits up to, so that in 1988, remember I told you the first one with cores was a million bits in this machine that fit into a one-car garage. In 1987, that's laid plans of mice and men. Well, anyway, here it is. Here was the Eagle chip that was being produced up here. Okay, here in the 970 building. It was followed by the Antelope chip in 973. So, no, it wasn't. I don't know whose it is.
So how big is that? I can't see it. So, so it's a finger's width.
Yeah, it went from this one-car garage down to this. But not, besides that, they were able to build it here at 0.5 millisecond per bit, which was absolutely amazing.
What was that made out of?
Silicon,
Silicon.
which is what we've always used here. So the point is, and it hasn't stopped there. I mean, they've continually made more density and higher speeds and lower costs, and now they merge the logic and memory together and the microprocessors, and it's just an amazing place. There's a lot of firsts here, and it has to do with being with IBM. You're always being asked to do the leading edge stuff. You got great people, and you got money to do it, and you just go do it. We had 2 million-bit chips here in production in '88, 2 different types for 2 different applications. Most people didn't even have one. So this has always been sort of a memory capital of the world, and the people have got a lot to do with it. It's the Yankee attitude in terms of getting the job done. Let's go do it.
What are they making out there now?
Gigabit, 1 million times more on a chip, gigabit. But they're putting that with the logic now, so that you got a whole system on a chip. Like they're building. You probably heard about these games that they just announced out of Microsoft and Nintendo and all that stuff. There's 3 different kinds. All 3 microprocessors are being done here. So.
It's the Wii, isn't it? W-I-I.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the chip that runs the Wii is also in the glass case out there. So
Yeah, that's true.
How come you people are right?
we asked. Charles said it was your 50th anniversary, so what was there? I just called IBM, and they did the can-do thing and brought it all over. But complete with that bunny suit out there.
Oh yeah. One last story here I think is kind of funny. When I was plant manager, at the end of the year, we would always have like a year review kind of thing. And the first half of the meeting would be reviewing the shipments and the costs and all that kind of stuff. And then we would invite some speaker in from the outside to speak. And this year, we got one of the astronauts, the one that walked on the moon, the second guy. I can't think of his name right now. And what happened was everything was set. And we had a snowstorm, just like we had on Valentine's Day here. And this guy was on the West Coast. I said, oh, my God. Stan Kirshner, some of you know who Stan is. I said, Stan, the show's got to go on. You got to get that guy here. Find a way. So he went out and he rented an executive jet and flew this guy from the West Coast here so he could give the talk. And as he comes into the room, we had a place for him to sit down. He sat down and he says, you know something? He says, I had a tougher time getting to Burlington than I did going to the moon. So it's a special place. I've got some great memories of things that we've done and the people that we've done them with. So,
Paul, did you meet the Watsons?
watching Junior. When we first built that 16-bit chip, the one that we went into the machine, the very first one, the IBM headquarters found out about this great invention that happened. So Watson brought the board of directors to my line so that they could walk around and see what was going on. And that's another funny story came out of that. Now, the girl was over there probing the wafer, and Watson comes over to me and says, "What is she doing?" I says, "Mr. Watson, she's probing the wafer and trying to pick the good ones from the bad ones." "Oh, okay. Do you mind if I go over there and look?" I know, go. But he goes over there and looks over his shoulder. "Miss, can I look through the microscope?" "Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead." So he looks and he looks and he looks and he looks. And he comes back to me. And he says, "You got her on piecework?" I said, "No, I don't have her on piecework." He says, "Why don't you put her on piecework? She'll make more good dye for you." President of IBM. But it was a real privilege working with these two guys. We had a lot of good times. Thanks.
Okay, this time you have to come up here and,
I gotta have a story.
well, come on up here.
Wait a minute, I just want to
Oh,
keep
one more.
Paul going, because he mentioned the corporate, and it was, they were little,
Cheerios.
they're little Cheerios, is the best way to describe them, and the thread wires went through them. And I had just made first line manager short time before, and it put me on night. And so in the coal plains here with 21 girls from Champlain College working from 7 at night to 11, and I'll tell you, that was an experience for first line manager, because I did everything from telling them they can't do their homework to anything else, but we did get the coal plains out finally. And I should have mentioned that they were great workers as long as they didn't have the books with them and that stuff. But they came around. We had a good time.
That's a great story.
Any questions? Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Paul. That's great. Paul's the one that produced the pink sheet that you all had. And so we didn't have questions, Paul. So
Yeah.
now, we need you up
That's
here.
okay. Yeah, you got it.
Come to
Come
the
on.
front so people can see you and the camera can see you.
Ooh.
Here, come right.
What I wanted to share with you is just a couple of stories. And one was the time that, see, what used to get people a little nervous, especially the managers and the executives, was the fact that Watson liked to ski. So he'd fly up, they'd have his car would be at the airport, get in his, I look back on it, he probably used it as a business expense, you see. But at any rate, he'd fly up, and he'd get in his car, and of course he'd be going by the IBM plant, come in unannounced. So every plant manager always had that fear in their head. But he was you got the feeling he was a nice guy. So one time, it was summertime, and he comes in, so they called for a plant meeting. So we all meet in the, where they made the wire contact relays, right in the assembly line. And Watson is speaking in the microphone, and he says, he says, I had a dream last night, and it was a nightmare. My dream was a nightmare because I had to go before the board of directors and argue the case for air conditioning in Vermont. Of course, now the place is all air conditioned. I'm just going to share a quick story with you, and it will show back how when we came up here, a lot of us were learning, really. And I was the supervisor at the time. I came up from Poughkeepsie, came to Burlington in July of '57. My wife and I had just got married, and I was a supervisor of shipping and traffic. Now, Leo, don't take this personally. And I don't know how it happened. At the end of the workday, I go out and I see this station wagon that the company owned. This is in 1957. And I see it's loaded with wire contact relays up to the roof. And sitting in the front is Leo Knox. He's nodding his head, yeah? And I said, Leo, where are you going? He said, we got an emergency delivery to Poughkeepsie. I forget the exact sequence, but Dana Kilcrease, I know what I did. I called up Bill Paradise, the project manager, because my boss wasn't there. And he tells me, yeah, Leo's got to get down there. In the meantime, Dana Kilcrease, the plant manager, comes down. And he says, I don't want that station wagon. He said, I forget exactly how it happened, but I knew I was in a bad situation because I didn't know anything about it. And I'm trying to figure, how did this all happen? I find out that the project manager had made the arrangement. Kilcrease comes down, the plant manager, and said, I've just called up Marcel Trucking. I want you to arrange for direct shipment tomorrow to get those relays to Poughkeepsie. I said, okay. So when the rest of the staff, 2 or 3 people come in, I say to the traffic expert, we've made this arrangement for direct use of the truck. It was expensive to go to Poughkeepsie. He says, cancel it. I can get it for half that price. I says, you sure? He said, yes. He said, cancel it. I said, who are you going to use? He said, we'll use Babineau Trucking. The Marcel truck is in. I tell the truck to go back. As the truck is leaving the site, he sees the Babineau truck come in. Puts 2 and 2 together, goes back and tells Mr. Marcel. Meantime, we get the Babineau truck loaded, full of relays. It takes off. Next thing I know, Bill Paradise comes down. We're all going to get fired. He says, that truck is illegal. It's not licensed by the Interstate Commission. Back at that time, all the trucks were regulated. So I'm sitting there thinking, wow, my wife is pregnant. I just bought a house. I'm going to get fired. And this says something about the company back in those days. And so Paradise comes out, and please, I'm not mean this as reflection against anybody. We were all learning. He said, can you stop the truck? I think the truck is down by Fairhaven now. He said, what if we sent the state guard, the state police after it? I said, they'll be in New York. How about a helicopter? So we're all in a panic. And next, the Poughkeepsie Traffic Department calls up, and they say, what are you hayseeds up there doing? You've got a truck down lined up with all our deliveries without an Interstate Commerce Commission license on the doors. So at any rate, make a long story short, the relays were delivered. The Poughkeepsie Traffic Department thought we were a bunch of hicks, and it was a learning curve. So Dana Kilcrease told me, I said, gee, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. He said, don't worry about it. I'm going to take Mr. Marcel to dinner tonight. Leo, you remember that fiasco, right?
Very well.
You want to add to it?
Very well.
You want to add to it? Huh? Come up here and do it.
You pretty well covered that little incident.
Leo, why don't you come up here so the camera can get your smiling face?
All right.
And tell them, besides Leo, what's the rest of your name when you get to the front?
My name is Leo Knox.
Leo Knox, you got that for the record. What did you do at IBM?
I was in security.
He couldn't be bribed.
In fact, I was the first local person hired by IBM March 18th of 1957. There's some discussion about that, but take my word, I'm number one.
I won't tell Dave.
I went to IBM in March 18th to 50. I had just got out of the Marine Corps, and my father told me, he said, I think you better get a job. I was having a pretty good time. I was living at home, things were good. So anyway, he said, IBM just moved in town. I think you ought to go up there. So I said, well, all right. So I did. I came to Essex Junction, and the only time we came to Essex was go to the fair. We never came to Essex. Lincoln Inn once in a while for dinner or something like that. So I came to Essex trying to find IBM. Where is IBM? So I went to the station on the corner, gas station. Adaricio was running it, Gene Adaricio. I said, where is IBM located? Well, he said, you turn around, go down the street, about, half a mile or so, and you take a left. So I did. And it was a dirt road. And I started going down this dirt road, and I said, this can't be IBM. Everything we've heard about IBM coming into town, it was coming of the second Messiah or something. No drinking, no cashing your checks in bars and all this stuff. I said, wow, I don't want to work there. So anyway, I kept driving. It was 1 mile from the road out, and I came to this field, and there was a little small building out there. So I went up to the building, and a girl was sitting there, and I said, is this IBM? She said, yes, it is. So I said, I'd like to fill out an application. She said, fine. So I filled out the application. 2 weeks later, I was in the door, security. And you talk about IBM, meeting Watsons. I met Watsons. I met Tom Watson. I met Mrs. Watson, Tom Watson Sr.'s wife. Tom Watson Jr., when he used to park he had a Volkswagen bus, and he parked it at the airport. And one of my jobs as a security officer was to go over and check on his vehicle for him, which I did. And he thanked me for it. He said, doing a great job. Nobody stole it. Gas was in the tank and everything. So I met him on that deal. And then another time, he came to the plant on a Saturday morning. Like you said, he used to drive through unannounced. And Saturdays, there was nobody working. I was the only person in there. And I saw this car come up, and I saw the plate, and it says T.J. Jr., Connecticut. And I said, oh, boy. So he came in, and he says, do you know who I am? I said, yes, I do. And he says, you mind if I walk around the plant, take a while? I said, no, go right ahead. You own the place, pal. So he did. He came around, walked around the plant, and he came back out, and he to the lobby, the main lobby, and he wanted to know, he says, what are those little buildings we got around the plant here? And what they did, they kept hoses and fire equipment in these little buildings around the plant. He says, he says, they look like outhouses to me. He says, I don't kind of like the looks of those things. He says, not with any IBM image. So he said, I want to take a look at one of them. So he did, and went out there, and I unlocked it for him. Yeah, he says, this isn't the IBM image. So I said, oh, okay. So I came in, he left. I called my manager. His name was Ray Delaney. He just died here a couple of weeks ago. He was a nice guy, real nice guy. So I told him Mr. Watson was up here and what he said about the little sheds we had around here. He said, no, you're kidding me. I said, no, I'm not. I said, I'm telling you the truth. So he said, boy, we got to do something about that. So anyway, probably by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they were gone. They got a hold of maintenance and Irvin Osterhout and all those guys. They came in, tore the things down. That was the end of that. I stayed at IBM for 28 years, and I went out on a medical disability. That's it.
Well, did I leave anything out on the relay story?
Well, I could tell a little bit different.
We want to hear the real story.
The real story? No, you covered it pretty good.
Other stories. It can be later on in the history.
I got a.
Stand
George
up
was a
and
big.
stand up and tell it.
Stand up and George was a big factor in, we were an IBM company and we did stuff for computers and so on. And at one time, we used to keep track of the product on the manufacturing floor. As it went through the gates in production control, they would punch out a card. Then sometime after midnight, they would print out a report. And the very next morning, you would know where the product was as of midnight. Well, we came out with an FMS system, which is floor manufacturing system. And our managers were not that keen on that. They didn't believe it And George used to bet coffees with, we had a guy in St. Albans by the name of Ron Toof, who was a manager. And George would accuse Ron of having some product in his area, and because FMS said that he did, and Ron says, oh no, it isn't in my area. And so George would bet a coffee with Ron, and you know, our FMS manufacturing system was usually pretty accurate, and it was one of those things where we had a lot of difficulty in getting people to believe the computer that it could actually keep track of stuff. And they ran a duplicate system with the punch cards, which went through and were in packets and so on, and the floor manufacturing system for quite a while. And I can't remember which one of the guys said something about air conditioning, but I'm sure that those of us working on the line out there remember that I was working on the 4-position relay in the middle of the plant, and we didn't have air conditioning, and we get kind of warm over in the middle of the line, and we would go over to the outside and open the windows, and by the time we would get back, there was a lady working over there on the outside, and I won't even mention her name, but by the time we got back to, down would come the windows, and we never could get any fresh air there too much. But yeah, we did have a lot of fun. Some of the old pictures of the plant from the air, you will see where there were a bunch of horseshoe pits there, and people played horseshoes, and we had people that really, in the summertime, they played horseshoes. In the wintertime, it was cribbage, and that was inside the plant. But it was a great group of people. I made manager in 1964, and at that time, the whole management team in Burlington was typed out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And there wasn't a big span between the first line manager, and you can correct me on this, but I think you had the first line manager who reported to a project manager in manufacturing who reported to Frank Keenan, and I think Frank Keenan reported to the plant manager. So that's how.
World reported to Frank.
Yeah. But no, it was a truly great place to work. I worked a little over 35 years there, and I have nothing but great things to say about the company, and I'm having a great retirement and having a lot of fun. And I have a website that I call it the old IBMer website. And we have it password protected, and nobody will ever guess the user ID, which everybody has, which is IBM 1957. The password is Watson. So this is really, I had to really dig in there to find those. And that's for real, yeah.
So say the address real carefully again, so everybody gets it and they can look in on it. So you're
I have pictures of, I started off with the very first anniversary that we had here at IBM. The 20th anniversary was quite a thing. And I have the 20th anniversary booklet, and I put those pictures up. I have the 25th anniversary. I have that picture. I haven't got that far yet because that's the one up in Stowe. That was, they invited the originals up. I can't remember.
This was the 25th anniversary with all the original people.
Okay.
Out at Stowe.
Okay.
And that's another story.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. We also have another one that they took at the 35th anniversary of the people that were still working there too. And it's a black and white. These are all scanned from Stan Kirshner, who worked for Paul Castrucci, did a lot of those pictures, and I would love to get the originals to be able to scan them on there, but most of them are the different books that they were done, and we didn't believe in using high quality paper at the time, so those scannings are done right from there. And but there's probably, I communicate with about probably 350 old IBMers, and You know, guys like Dick Millhouse, who's out in Reno, Nevada. We've got a lot of them down in Florida. The recent hurricane down there, I kept getting updates from everybody, and I put them up on the website. And
So your website's called, say your website address real slowly, so everybody gets it.
oh, my website address, you have to have a password, but you, which I just gave you, but it's, if you go to www.vtgrandpa, all one word, vtgrandpa.com/IBM. www.vtgrandpa.com/IBM.
My guess will be in tomorrow's paper.
The reason I don't want it in the paper is because a lot of our old IBMers send us pictures, and it has a password, mainly so that the spammers can't get in there and do a bunch of stuff. You won't find it on any, if you were to do a search for it, you won't find it. And we say what we think. And you know, it's a case where we've got some Ed Walsh is a big contributor. He's down in Florida, and he's the president of about 300 retired IBMers across the country, not necessarily just Burlington. And down there in the villages, I think he said there's about 30 Burlington IBMers that live there.
You might be interested in Tom Henry and the hurricane?
Yeah, Tom Henry lost his house. Yes. Yeah, his wife made it into the closet. He didn't. And apparently, if you have a hurricane, what you do is you try to find a closet and get into it. Well, Tom's, I don't know his wife, his friend, went into the...
Henry, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
I live about 5 miles from him, but I was in direct communications with Tom when it happened.
Oh, were you?
Tom did get into the closet.
Okay.
And it happened around 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, 3:15.
Tom thought it was all over with, so his bright idea, he was smart in IBM, but not there. He got out of the closet, he went looking for a flashlight.
Uh-huh.
Which happened, the glass was still running around and everything, and he got cut up pretty badly.
Okay.
And he never got the flashlight when he got back in the closet.
Oh.
And then it was all over with.
Okay.
But that's how it really happened.
Okay, good, because I did get a bunch of...
He's okay now. Everybody's okay.
Yeah, he did lose his house, though.
Lost his house, he lost his car. And his golf cart.
Yeah, his 2x4 went through his golf cart, yeah. So, yeah, oh, you live down in the villages? Okay, yeah.
I've got a question. When did the bunny suits start?
Those started in 1963, and those were the first white room garments that they had, and they're quite a bit different. They had a room that had a positive pressure that pushed the air out, and when they came to clean those rooms, the reed switch, they had ordinary garden hoses, and that's how they cleaned those. They washed the floor, they washed the walls, and that was one of the first areas that I was the manager of. And some of those employees did clown around once in a while, and if you happen to stick your head in there when they were cleaning the rooms, you might have to wipe your glasses
So what
off.
were the first bunny suits made out of, cotton or plastic?
Nylon, aren't they?
I think they were nylon.
I think they were nylon, yeah.
Mind you, one little quick story there when you got onto the bunny suits, but it was after I had made superintendent, and I got the word down from the plant manager that Vincent Learson was going to tour the site. And he not only had a big job, he was the CEO of IBM, but he was a big man. And I was nervous, and I wouldn't lie to you, but, you know, I had a good job, but nothing compared to what he had. So I sat down up by, I think it was Paul Lowe's office, I can't remember who was the site manager. And they knew I was nervous, and so this Mr. Learson, as big and as tough as he was supposed to be, came over and he said, look, you've got nothing to worry about. All we're going to do is take a tour, George. And I mean, that meant a lot to me, him just saying that. So The part I want to tell you is we did take the tour, and we went into a photo area. Was going to go into a photo area, but that gloves, everything was required. And he said, well, I don't have the time to put them on. And this is tough for me now. I said, well, you don't have time to do that then, because that's what it has to be. And he said, you gotta be kidding me. And I said, no, sir, Mr. Lewis, I'm not kidding. I said, you know, nobody else can go in there with that, and you can't either. Well, I'll tell you, I didn't know until we got back to the tour, I still was working for IBM, and I was. You know, I tell you, that was probably the toughest job I ever had with that thing. But he took it all right, I think, but I'm still here.
Just to give you an example of who T.T. Burgess was and how he operated, he, as a hobby, he had a sailboat, and he always used to race with that. And he's the guy that would just push that thing right to the limit and snap the mast. So
Something else.
He's the kind of guy that just, you know, say, take no for an answer.
Yeah.
Get it done.
I didn't want to tell him, I couldn't, boy, I tell you what.
Some of these tours could be very, very embarrassing, because we had another situation in Reed Switch. And they tested those Reed switches, and they had like a Cintron bowl, and those switches went down through. Some went in a good pan, and some went in a bad pan, okay? And then what they would do, since the testers maybe weren't that reliable, they would take the bad ones, they'd put them in a Cintron bowl, and then they would let them go through again. And so one of the bigwigs came through. That's probably not what I should be saying. One of the higher management came through, and they said they can't fire me now anyway. They put them through the Cintron bowl, and one of the guys going through on a tour says, "Well, how many times do you do that?" And Bernie says, "Until they all go through."
That's a work ethic.
Did you want to come up?
No, I don't really have any memories except having grown up here and seeing all the big developments come up. So I know that IBM had a big effect on real estate. Also, computers and education. And I happen to know someone that sold IBM all of their office equipment, call-offs, Don Lawrence. And I was wondering, are there any other area businesses that were affected by
several.
IBM being here?
Oh, several, many, everything. I think everything was affected.
Travel businesses, people going on business trips, certainly, and the transportation, airlines, so on, certainly affected. Colleges and universities.
We used a ratio of 4 to 1.
Okay,
For
so
every
it's
IBMer, there was 4 in the
The backup support, yeah.
When did people, we had a French couple, a little girl who was about my daughter's age when they were both about 5, and she went from having no English to perfect English in about 6 months, and her father worked in France. When did foreign folks start arriving here in Burlington to work?
I'm gonna guess that maybe I don't recall any of that in the early days. There was no need for it, because all the
I can help there. We developed the phase 2 and the phase 2I memories here, and that was like 68 to 71.
Yeah.
We also transferred that to other plants in IBM worldwide. We went to Sindelfingen in Germany, and also Solz, France, and later on, Yasu, Japan.
Paul?
And every time we transferred one of those people would come here for 6 months.
Well, that's why, okay.
Paul, we also had the group will remember this, CMOS and TROS. Remember those read-only memories for the 360 series? There was always people coming from England, France, and that's because they would be building them over there. So a lot of them are
It
actually.
was funny with the Japanese when they came here with their wives and the daughters. And the daughters actually got automobile licenses to drive. They don't drive in Japan, women like that. So when they went back, they were really spoiled. Had real problems.
Are there other stories that people can tell about dealing with the foreign folks at IBM? Because I know we really enjoyed having neighbors from IBM, and we went to visit them when we were in France when the kids were
I
little.
had, over the years in my department, we'd have somebody from, say, Sindelfingen German plant, or the Solz plant, or perhaps something in England come and spend a year there to see what we were doing in the production area, and to bring it back. So there was this interaction that way.
So that's good.
Yeah.
We had a World Trade Department which handled all the incoming foreign people.
Yeah.
We had a World Trade representative, Paul Peter was our World Trade representative here.
I got a nice recipe for pretzels from a German. They came for about 6 months.
Any other fun, funny, or scary stories? Yes?
I just want to say something.
Do you want to come up to the front?
No, I just
Okay.
want to address George for a minute. He talked about working on that night shift. I wasn't in Corky at the time, it was Reed Switch, but I worked for you, and he was a wonderful guy to work for. Heck of a good
You don't have to say
manager.
that.
I know I don't have to say it now, but it's true.
He does too, I
Really
paid
was.
him.
And it was on nights, and when we had a particularly good night, production-wise, George would come down, and he would head off to the little cafeteria we had. Remember that little one out there? And pretty soon he was cooking up some eggs and ham or whatever. And lo and behold, he said, "Come on, you guys, let's go for breakfast." Remember that? And he not only was a good manager, he was a good cook.
Nice. Are there further questions? Corky?
I have just one thing, and then I have to go because I have a meeting in Brattleboro at 7 o'clock tonight.
Ooh.
But in 1958, we had a vote on a merger of the town and the village.
How'd it go?
Needless to say, it went down the tubes big time. And I understand that you had a vote recently, and it went down the tubes big time. I don't know if I have any wise counsel to the folks that are running Essex and Essex Junction these days, but I do feel that a community of what now, 16 or 17,000, Charlie?
Yeah.
Located in 36 square miles, really needs to have a combined central government. And I would hope that maybe in 2028, this might happen. So it's been very nice to be here, and you're really having a great meeting.
Yeah, we have Charles would like to make a statement. Thanks, Corky.
Hey, Corky, there you go. Nice meeting you, really was, yeah.
Corky, thank you again.
My pleasure.
Great to have you come.
I'm not going to speak to the merger issue, but
We do have refreshments.
probably, I'm Corky 50 years later. And Corky was a tremendous municipal manager and an inspiration to all of us in the profession. He was an early pioneer, and I'm indebted to him, and so I wanted to say that before you left, and I appreciate you making your way up here. And but I also wanted to take a chance to thank all of you. Essex Junction, Vermont, and literally the world are indebted to you for your contribution to computer technology, our standard of living, and quality of life we all enjoy. We are the beneficiaries of your hard work, and I want to take a chance to let you know we all appreciate it. Corky from the community planning and laying the foundation from that side of the equation, but certainly you folks are pioneers as well, and at least we not forget that. And it's great to see all you here today, and I just wanted to take a chance, an opportunity on behalf of the community to say that. I know George very well, but I don't often get a chance to see all of you. Thanks.
Thank you.